Okay, we can start the session within a few minutes. So is my audio clear? Hello, is my audio clear now? Okay, so we can start the session. Okay, so we can start the session. So good evening all. Myself Vishnu. I am from Thiruvananthapuram. I will be taking a session on the on developing applications using the cloud platforms, and there are few cloud platforms out there, and the most popular ones are we can name to three. That's the Azure cloud, then the Amazon Web Services, and the Google Cloud. So today in this session, we don't have time enough to cover the Google Cloud as well. So we will be planning to cover Azure as well as the Amazon, and to get an overview about what all these cloud platforms provide, so that a new one to cloud can understand the similarities of these cloud platforms and can start developing the application. So I will share my screen. So if you have any questions or clarifications at any point of time, feel free to interrupt me, and you can ask the questions through the chat panel, group chat panel. So maybe we have to cover a lot of things in this session, so I don't have enough time to answer all the questions, but I will share the questions, share the answers to your questions all in a text file, and that will be shared to a repository. So I can share my screen and show you how to access those answers to all the questions. So you can, okay, so you can go to my GitHub repository. Second. Okay, this is my GitHub repository. So I have created a new project called the Azure AKS demo. So after this session, I will be uploading all the questions and its answers, which I can't able to answer through the session because we have to cover a lot of things and there will be much limited time only. So we will be going through all these things. So please hold on. So this is my GitHub repo, and you have to go to this one, Azure AKS demo. And I will be sharing this link as well along underneath the YouTube link, and I also can paste that in the YouTube chat as well, so that you will get an idea about that. Yeah. So this is my link, so you can go through there after the session. So we can start with the with an introduction of what's the importance of cloud platform and what are the benefits and why companies are going to the cloud platform. So from that we can start understanding about cloud, some of the benefits of cloud, and then we can dive more into some of the common features of both the platforms, as we are going to discuss about both the Azure as well as this Amazon Web Services. They have a few things common in general, and we will be discussing those things. And after that, we will be looking into the storage concepts. So the storage concepts are very important in the cloud platform because every application has to store its data. So we'll be talking a bit about how we can store the data in the Azure as well as on the Amazon. And then we will dive more deep into the compute things, which will cover the different ways by which we can create a VM, as well as how we can host a website in both Amazon and Azure. We will be looking into all the different options by which we can go do those kinds of things. And we briefly touch on the identity and security, but we don't have that much time to cover the advanced topics like the identity and security as well as the networking, because those are beyond the scope of this session. So that will be covered in a future session later. Then we will also look into some of the monitoring options that are available in both the platform, because monitoring option is also very important in application development. We have to develop the application and we have to deploy that, but we also need to monitor how it is working, so we can see what all are the different tools that are available with both Azure as well as the Amazon Web Services to help monitoring the applications. So that way we can start the session. So let's first understand about what is cloud computing and why people are going towards, or organizations are going towards the cloud computing. So maybe you are familiar with the earliest way of developing by which an infrastructure is spinned up in the on-premise environment, and for that spinning up of the infrastructure in on-premise environment, it cost a lot of money from the part of organization. And later a way of model came up, that is the cloud computing. The cloud computing way is by which it's kind of a way by which different cloud vendors provide you the space as well as the resources, but you have to pay a bit money for that. And different cloud vendors are out there, like the Amazon Web Services as well as the Google, and then the Azure. And also there are a lot of other providers as well. So the advantage of using this kind of cloud providers is that you can use their service on demand. You can scale up the resources on demand, and in case if you don't require any resources, you can scale down the resources, and that can save the cost. and because it is based on a shared model, just like we use electricity in our home, and it's produced in a different area, and it's means of a shared infrastructure. So the cost will be saved that much. So you have to pay a little bit of money for that, and then you can use the resources from the cloud, and when it is required you can use, and you can scale up, and then when you don't need the resources you can shut down the resources. So many of the cloud resources and many of the resources from these providers support that kind of functionality where we can scale up and scale down, and we will be understanding all those things as we going through the session. So at any point of time, if you feel any doubts or clarification, feel free to share that in the chat. So as I explained earlier, I may not be able to look all the questions and answers, but I will make it a point to check all the questions, and I will add that as answers in a text file in this repository, so you can check that later as well. So the benefits of cloud computing, we can start from there. Some of the benefits of cloud computing are we can scale up the resources and scale down. We already discussed that, and the cost is much less when because of a shared kind of resources, and you don't have to bother about the infrastructure and all kind of thing. You can just focus as an application developer. You can just focus on the actual thing you want to do, and you can focus on that, and you can develop the application, and you can deploy that to the cloud provider. Also in terms of development, also sometimes you need certain resources, so you can spin up that easily using the cloud platform. For example, when developing an application, often there needs a requirement for testing and to ensure the quality. From a quality perspective, we need to ensure the quality and all those things, so we can set up an environment quite fastly. So if you imagine this in the earliest model of development, it is like you would be spinning up an environment in your local infrastructure, and it requires a lot of upfront cost. So you can avoid all those things in the case if you use the Azure, and that's why more and more organizations are moving into the Azure platform. And this cloud, we can look into we have seen some of the advantages of cloud. So you can view a lot of advantages of cloud if you search in Google. So you can go to Google and search the advantages of cloud computing, and it provides a lot of benefits. So for example, if I search advantages of cloud computing, you can see that it's a lot of benefits that provides. So a lot of blogs are already defined that, so I am not going to all those details again. So you can check that if you are new to cloud computing. So the advantages and disadvantages of cloud computing, mostly the advantages are there, and you can follow some of the link and you will get an idea what's some of them are we already discussed, and you can understand about that. Then we can look into the cloud services Azure and Amazon one by one. First we can look into the Amazon Web Services. So right now I have logged into the Amazon Web Services, and that is the screen which you are viewing now. So before understanding about this particular service, we can look into one by one these services. First we can understand a general concepts about these both platforms, the Azure and Amazon. So we can start from the timeline, how it started the Amazon Web Services. So from there we can move forward. So hopefully you can view the screen now. So the Amazon started around the March of 2006, and they started with their service with S3. So that is the storage service, and this is the first service that Amazon came up with. And then nearly a few months later, in August, same year, August of 2006, they came up with EC2. So EC2 is a service similar to the VM. So if you from the Azure or the .NET world, you might have already heard the word Azure VM. So that similar service is called EC2, Elastic Computing Services. So Amazon launched that in 2006, and by 2008 they started different other things like e-block storage, like EBS and such things. Then by August 2008. So I will type this thing so that you will get a familiarity of that. EBS. Then by November 2008, they came up with a service called CDN, Azure CDN. So this is the content delivery network, and this can be used to serve the resources for different applications. Maybe if you are familiar with the web development, you often see this CDN. It's like a way by which you can store these resources in different parts of the world, and the CDN will share that content quite fastly, and that's the advantage of using a content delivery network. Then in October 2009, they came up with a service called RTS. So this is the relational database service that came up from Amazon Web Services, relational database services. And a few years later, in January 2012, they came up with a service called DynamoDB, which features a lot of advanced features like the unstructured data and all those things. So it's quite different from the relational model. So that's they came up with the DynamoDB. And if you look into these kind of features which Amazon developed through this from 2006 to 2012, you can understand that they have consistently developed a few of the features up to the current. So if you log into Azure this Amazon portal and look into some of the services, you can see quite a lot of services out there. So these came up later. So they have a consistent list of features that they have developed throughout these years, and that's one of the advantage of this Amazon Web Services. And another advantage you can compare that with regards to the Azure is that Azure is more focused on the kind of .NET based environment, but it has Linux distributions and everything that are connected with open source. But this Amazon Web Services, as they started earlier, they have the much more features, especially from a Linux perspective. So a lot of Linux based systems are already, Linux based services are already there in the Amazon Web Services, and that quite similar services are also there in Azure. But many blogs are saying that if you are looking into pure Linux based development or such perspective, Amazon services is much suitable for that, as it has a lot of features related to from that point of view, from a Linux point of view. I hope you got my point. Then some of the features we have discussed now, and we can look into how the Azure came into picture. So I quickly go through the way by which how the development started with the Azure. So this is that, and in October 2008, Microsoft Azure came into being, and Azure. Then on a year later, in March 2009, they came up with a service called SQL Server. SQL Server, that's the relational database from the Microsoft. So already they have a relational database, so they integrated that into the Azure and came up with a service called Azure database. So that came up in 2009. 2009. So this is called as Azure SQL. Then by 2009, this is in March 2009, and by November of 2009, they came up with more integration to the open source community, like the PHP and the Java. So they have integrated that into the Azure, and later a lot of non-Microsoft open source products are also integrated into Azure. So now if you look into Azure, so this is the portal of Azure. You can view a whole list of services that are both Microsoft as well as open source. Mostly open source is there, like the Redis and everything is there. So lot of different services are out there. Redis, this Azure Kubernetes. So we will be discussing all those services a bit later in this session. So that is how the cloud providers work. They are trying to integrate not just their platform details, they are also integrating all the different services out into this ecosystem so that the developers can easily start working on that. So if you compare the services offered by both, you can understand that both are quite kind of a similar services. So we can go through that in this session, and then you can understand that both of the both of the platforms offer kind of a similar service. So if you look into here, there you can see that there is a service called S3. So there is a similar service in Azure as well called the Azure Storage. So similar way, there is a virtual machine there in Azure, and you have the similar service called EC2 here. So we can create all those things as we going through the session. So I hope you get an idea of this. So if you have any questions or comments, you can share that in the chat window. Otherwise, we can continue the session. Okay. So we already covered about the major timelines of two cloud vendors, the Amazon Web Services as well as the Azure. So if you look into this both the timeline, you can see that Amazon consistently developed a few of the features from 2006 to up to the current. So these I have mentioned only the main features out there. So up to current the year 2021, they have added a lot of new features, and similarly the Azure also added a lot of features. But when coming to the Azure during the 2014, there came up with a major change. It is called the Azure ARM template. So they introduced these things. So earlier, this is called the Azure Resource Manager. So those of you who worked with Azure is already aware about these things, like the Azure Resource Manager. So every time we create a new resource in Azure, so we can create under a resource group, and so that concept, this Azure ARM template based resources, that came up in 2014. So before that, it was using a kind of an Microsoft based proprietary API, which is called as Azure Classic. So if you see some of the resources in Azure, you can see that both the classic VM as well as the new ARM based resources out there from the Azure portal. So this is because after the 2015, this Azure Resource Manager came into being, and that eased a lot of things, especially from the point of maintenance and other things. This Azure Resource Manager adds a lot of features, and this is one of a major change that came up in 2014. So until then, this Azure Resource Manager evolved, came into being. It was working in a kind of a how to say like a kind of an one-by-one pattern. There is no serial parallel functionality is provided in Azure. So if you have to deploy 10 VMs, you have to go through one by one, creating a VM one by one through the scripts. But as the when this ARM came into being, it adds the support for parallelly spinning up the different resources in Azure. So that is one of the major advantages. And before this 2014, Amazon already has that support for parallel spinning up of resources. So inspired from that, Azure also started integrating that support called the in terms of the Azure Resource Manager, so that it allows the developers to parallelly spin up multiple resources on the fly. So that is one of the major things that came into being during the 2014. This is called the ARM. So if you search about ARM, you will get more picture about that. But there are still some old Azure customers that are using the classic model. That is why Microsoft is keeping the old classic model as it is. But if you are creating a new resource, it will be better to create, or that will be by default into the Azure Resource Manager. So that provides more features, more support for compatibility as well as for managing the different resources. So I hope you got the point now. Now we have understand a different timelines of these two vendors, the Azure and the Amazon. Now we can understand how an external person or a developer, how they are going to interact with the particular cloud. So we have two cloud providers, like this is Microsoft Azure, then this is Amazon Web Services. As a developer, how I can interact with the system. So that is what we are going to look next. So there are different ways. One is the way by which you are viewing now. From the browser, you can interact with the cloud provider through a graphical interface. That is what you can view now. And similarly, Azure also provides a graphical interface. So you need to sign up, and once you sign up and log into Azure, you will get a portal by which you can interact with the cloud. So interaction means you will be able to interact with the cloud. You are instructing the cloud, okay, create a particular resource, okay, delete a particular resource and everything, and the cloud does everything for you, but you will be interacting with the cloud through a graphical interface way. So there is a mobile app support also for this, both the vendors, this Azure as well as the Amazon. So if you install that in your mobile, you can use that particular mobile app to interact with here as well. So there is also a bot also that is supported from different channels like the Skype. So it's called Azure bot or something. You can search that, and if using the bot, you can interact with the Azure through a more natural language way. So you can instruct, okay, let's spin up a VM, and that bot will automatically spin those things. So that's the part of that bot framework. But that way you can interact. So graphical way as well as from the mobile application way you can interact. So that is the way by which we humans interact with the cloud. But what about the resources going to interact with the cloud? So that is there are different ways out there. One way is through the REST API. So this is the traditional way by which different services interact with each other. So this can be an HTTP or an HTTPS based APIs. Mostly HTTPS is what preferred, and it can interact with the different cloud vendors. So different APIs are provided. We will see how we can integrate all these APIs into our application. So I will be covering all those as well. So then there are other forms of interaction, so I can mention here. So I will be sharing this particular slide after the this text notepad after this session, so that you can go through the topics and you can refresh that as well. Okay. Okay, so the REST API, you can use the HTTPS based REST API. So once again, your application will be interacting to the cloud using that particular REST API. Then comes the CLI or the command line interface. There are different command line interfaces that are provided by both the Microsoft Azure as well as Amazon. From Microsoft Azure, it's called the Azure CLI. So if you are developing the application using Azure, you are already familiar with these things, Azure CLI. So this you can download from the website, Microsoft website. If you search by Azure CLI download, so the search engine will guide you to the exact page where you can download. So based on the type of operating system you are using, you can download and install that. So this is on another way by which you are going to interact with the cloud. So we have seen through graphical interface we can interact. Why we are interacting is we want to spin up a resource, or we want to scale up or scale down a resource. we want to do some other things as well in the cloud. So that is why we are interacting, and one way is graphical and another way is through this Azure CLI or CLI command line. If I say that in a generic way, I can say that a command line interface can be used to connect to the Azure or that particular cloud vendor. So based on your operating system, you have to download and install any of these things, and once you install, you can log in using the command called AZ space login. So AZ, so basically maybe here it will be Azure CLI, yeah, this one, yeah. So this is that command prompt looks like. So you can type command and you can log in. So right now I am not going to log in here there. So this is the command you can use to log in there. So all the things which you can do with these graphical interfaces, you can do that with the help of this Azure CLI as well, or the command line tool as well. So you may be thinking, okay, I can install that in my local machine and I can interact with the cloud. Once after authenticated, I can interact with the client. So that is fine. But what about if I don't have a particular machine, especially if I am going in vacation, or if I am in some outstation where I don't have my laptop with you. So if you have any access to any one of the machine, you can use a web browser and connect to this particular portal. So as you are logged into the portal, you can straight away interact with the resources through the portal. But here also there is an option provided, because certain types of things which we can, especially if you are going to automate something, or you want to do a series of actions in cloud, then it may not be feasible to open each of these resources and interact one by one. So in that case, it will be better to use a command line interface. And if you don't have your system or such kind of things available with you, you can obtain some whatever system you get, and then you can log into that, and then you can click on here. This is called the Azure CLI. So Microsoft has integrated that straight away into Azure. So instead of installing the Azure CLI locally, you can straight away interact with the Azure through the CLI from this portal itself. So the first time you are opening this particular CLI, it will ask you to provide a subscription so that it can create this storage. So the reason why it is asking to create a storage is you are going to execute certain scripts or some command, and if you want to persist that particular commands, or sometimes if you are going to download some tools and execute that against the Azure, like some source code from some Git repos or Azure repos, and you are going to push that particular source code into a particular, or you are going to deploy that into app service or something. So for that purpose, a storage is required. So for that purpose, you can create a storage here. The subscription is disabled and you cannot unsubscription. Okay. So this sometimes happen. Then we can refresh that. Then again we can start. Yeah. Okay, I think some problem is there. Usually I will be able to create that. Let's create a storage in a different area and see. Okay, we can check that data. This is not that much important. So usually this will work, and if you create that, the Azure CLI will be enabled. I hope you understand the concept. So similar way, this Amazon also provides a way by which you can interact. That is called the Amazon CLI. So that's called the Cloud Shell. You can call that as Cloud Shell, because that is the correct term according to Amazon, and that will automatically open. So similar way as we need to have a persistent storage. So Amazon is offering an option like, okay, 1 GB of storage free per AWS region, and So you can close this warning. Okay, and it is pinning up that particular CLI. So the advantage is that everything that you want to interact with the cloud is enabled in this particular web-based CLI, so that you can directly interact instead of installing anything locally in your machine. You can interact directly from this portal itself. So that is one of the advantages of using this kind of cloud shell, AWS cloud shell. So we are now discussing about the ways by which we are interacting. So so far we have covered two things, like the graphical interface. Then we also covered the this Azure CLI, or the command line interface tool. Then as well as the REST API, we also covered that REST API as well. So that is another way by which we can interact. So three ways by which we can interact with the customers. First the graphical way, graphical way of interacting with the cloud. So these are some of the ways by which you can interact with the cloud. So let's look into one more thing. Like, if you are familiar with the PowerShell, that's a kind of a script way. You can also interact with the Azure or the Amazon using the PowerShell as well. So some of the ops or the DevOps developers are familiar with this kind of scripting language called the PowerShell. Even though it is developed by the Microsoft, still it is used in a variety of platforms, because recently Microsoft has open sourced this into the PowerShell core, and that enables that to integrate with the different other vendors as well. So this support is there for the Azure as well as for Amazon. So you can, if you are familiar with PowerShell, you can use that from the this portal as well, or from a PowerShell window, and you can interact with the particular cloud, whether it is Amazon or Azure. So we are now discussing about some of the ways by which interacting. Now the deployment models, we can check how, once we have a particular website or something, how we can deploy that using this particular cloud vendors. So different kinds of deployment models are supported. So this JSON template model, called the ARM, or also called ARM template model, is supported in this Azure. Then the AWS has use a different term. It's called the AWS Cloud Formation Template. Cloud Formation Template, and you can that uses both the JSON as well as the YAML. So that can be used. So here also YAML can be used for deployment. So there are different ways by which you can deploy. So this comes how it is applicable is, if you are developing an application, and for example, it's let's say it's a website. So you spin up that particular build and the deployment pipelines. We call that as pipelines. So you initially develop your application, then that application will be committed to a particular source control, and from that particular source control, it is wired to a particular pipeline. So the purpose of that pipeline is, whatever you have committed to the source code, it will be automatically built and triggered, and that will be deployed to a particular location, that is the server. So this enables the development teams to constantly focus and work on new features. So as fast as they develop, that gets deployed. So we can add different gates in that pipeline, so that it not gets automatically deployed to different environments. So there will be different environments, like the development environment. There will be a QA or a quality ensuring environment, and there will be another environment like the actual production environment. So after the QA, or even if before the QA, you can add the different gates, so that every time the user commits or changes something, it won't get triggered automatically, but only on the basis of a certain approval. But the idea here is, from a development perspective, once you made a change and committed to the particular source control, it should be readily available to the development environment so that you can verify that your changes are correctly in place. So for that purpose, you need to build up or wire up a build and deployment pipeline. So that build and deployment pipeline needs a certain kind of language or kind of a construct you use. So it's kind of a script, and that particular thing is called the ARM template. So you define here all what you need. Like for example, if you want to create a new database, or you want to insert some data from a particular location, or if you want to scale up something at the time of deployment, or whatever things, you all mention that in ARM template, and that the structure is like the YAML. So you have to study a bit about YAML to create those particular structures, and then you define that in files, and you can store that YAML in the source control as well, so that every time you commit something, it will be automatically gets deployed. And this helps in another feature as well, like not feature, this helps in another flexibility as well. Like if you want to alter something in deployment, you can just easily change the YAML and you can deploy that. So in terms of the Azure, it is called the ARM template, and in terms of Amazon, it is called the AWS Cloud Formation template. Not template, sorry, template. Okay, so I hope you got the point here. So this is the deployment model. So now let's understand about how can you start developing with the cloud. So I am already logged into Azure as well as the Amazon, but how as a newcomer to this particular cloud, how you are going to create a new account in Azure and Amazon. So I'll explain that. So Amazon, both the Amazon and the Azure offers free trials. So if you search for Azure free trials, okay, so this is the page that explains the Azure free account. So not this one, okay, this one, Azure. So if you are interested in creating a free account in Azure, you can go to this link, azure.microsoft.com/free. So this link may change, so the better way is you can search straight away in Google like Azure free account and go for a search, and probably the first link will be the one which will guide you to the page that can help you to create the Azure free account. So what's the benefit of creating a free account in Azure is that even though you have to provide the credit card, but still you won't get charged, and you will have a set of free services that you can consume for around 12 months. So these are kind of services which are of a basic tier. It's not an advanced tier or a premium tier, it's kind of a basic tier, but that will be enough for you to get started and to learn more about these services, and with that you can spin up different resources to understand more about the different free services they provide. So you can scroll down and you can get a picture of all these things. So if you want to spin up a Linux VM, you will get 750 hours in basic standard tier. So this one for the newcomers, they may be thinking what is this standard tier. So this is like the different categories of VM which the Azure can provide. So standard tier is the basic tier, and that offers a set of functionality and performance. But if you want to go for a production ready, you have to pay more, and you have to use a different tier. So all the tiers will be the basic tiers, but some of the things like for example, if you go into the storage here, okay, yeah, the storage, it is providing up to 5 GB of storage, so that is much cheaper. So all these things you can use for your learning as well as for development perspective. But for a production, it is not recommended to use this one. So for production, you need these resources to be created in an availability zone as well. So for all that purpose, you need to spend a bit of money. So this free tier is not suitable for such kind of thing, but for a learning perspective this is fine. Then for Azure, in addition to these 12 months free services, you will also get around $200 credit for the to explore for the first 30 days. So if you use this credit or not, it will automatically expire after the 30 days. But you can still use the other free services, 12 months of free popular free services, but basically all that will be in a basic tier. So you can just use that for learning purpose. And there are some services which are always free, and you can explore that as well. So these are some of the highlighted services that are provided free. That is Azure Key Vault. This is used for storing the credentials, the certificates and the keys securely in a provision instead of hard coding that in our application. Similarly, the Azure database for MySQL as well as PostgreSQL. Lot of services are out there. So if you want to see the free services, you can scroll down. So we won't be able to cover all the different services in this session because of the time limit. But if you go through certain of the services, you can easily understand what it offers. So for example, okay, this Q&A maker. This is the kind of a service by which you can make a easily FAQ page. So mostly web services have an FAQ page, and if you want to create such a page, you can easily create using a Q&A maker. So it also integrates into the they also provide some of the AI as well as the machine learning features inbuilt with the Q&A maker, so that it provides a kind of a bit advanced kind of search, not just the search, just you search a particular keyword and it returns the thing. It automatically understands a bit more than that using this AI and machine learning. Similarly, there is a language understanding by which you can develop the bot and other application. If you are familiar with the concept of bot, that is a way by which you can interact with a particular application or a resource using a natural way. So instead of going and clicking this one, for example, imagine this is a tile and I want to click this particular tile and open that as a pop-up. So instead of going through and click this thing, I can naturally tell the particular chat to let's open this particular tile, like a kind of a conversational pattern. And behind the scene, it uses a service called language understanding service, and it automatically understand the intent or what events should be triggered from that particular conversation, and based on that particular methods can be triggered. So that is the Azure language understanding service. So up to 10,000 text request transactions are free. So if you are fine with this limit, then you can go ahead with this. So all these things are of basic tier. So you have the additional provision, like if you want to go beyond a particular limit, you can pay money and you can use that services. So next we have to understand another concept in Azure as well, called the subscription, because when you create a free account in Azure, it's always tied to a free Azure automatically creates a free tier. So I can just explain. For example, right now I am using a free tier of Azure. So if I create something, database like a storage or something, you can storage account. So if you create a service from here, so it should ask under which category which subscription that particular service should be created. So I have right now only one subscription called the free trial. So I can create that here. I can select that here. So if you have multiple subscription, you have to choose under which subscription this should be charged. So as I explained earlier, some of the basic services are always free. So if you select some subscription and choose a basic tier like a S0 or something, you won't get charged for that. But so all the different details about the cost and other things you can get from the Azure cost analysis page. So if you go to here, Azure cost analysis, you will get a page, sorry, not cost analysis, cost calculator. Yeah, Azure cost calculator, pricing calculator. So here you can understand what's the different pricing for each of these services. For example, if I click this storage, and if you scroll down, let's wait a minute for the page to load. Okay. Okay, think some problem is there. Let's click again. Okay, if you want to use some service and you have to provide some, sorry, 1 second, let's clear all this thing and reload again. Okay, we can check that later. I think some issue is there, maybe my internet connection issue or something. Okay, so the idea here is, if you are aware of how much you are going to spend, then you can select a subscription and create that. So right now I have only this free trial, and as free trial provides a certain set of features like the dollar as up to $200, as well as a certain set of free usage there, so I can always choose that. So this is one of the safe thing in Azure when compared with the Amazon, because in Amazon there is no concept of the subscription. So if you create a account in Amazon, you have to be extra careful while selecting the services, because you will get charged right away if you go out of the limit. For example, because in Amazon everything is tied up under one account. So right now my account is this one, and every resource under this one is tied to this particular account. So there is no concept of subscription or anything in this Amazon. Because I have this subscription concept here, this Azure will automatically identify that, okay, if you are going beyond a certain limit, it will automatically show the warning, and then based on that I can convert this free trial into a different subscription. For example, if I go to this subscriptions page, so I have this free trial here. So if I open that, and once that limit is over and all the free trial is over, and automatically a button will come on the top section to allow me to convert this particular subscription to a different pay as you go subscription. That means that after this free trial is over, that will be, I can convert this particular subscription that are created, all the resources that are created under this subscription to a different to a paid subscription, so that will be charged onwards. So that is on provision. But here in this Amazon there is no such the concept of the subscription is there. So you have to be extra careful while allocating the resources. So there is a possibility that you may get charged in case. So we can see another one thing. I can show you one more thing, like for example, if I'm going to create a S3 storage, so this is the equivalent of Azure storage in this is the equivalent of Azure storage, and so I am creating that one. Okay, so I can create a bucket here. Okay, let's create some other service like easy. 1 second. Okay, EC2. Okay. Okay, so what I did is like I have searched for EC2 because I want to spin a virtual machine in Amazon. So in Amazon it is called the EC2, Elastic Compute Services. So that is what called the EC2. So if you type EC, it will automatically show here, that is the virtual servers in the cloud. So this is equivalent to Azure, this virtual machine. So when I created that, in the terms of the Amazon, it is called the launch instance. So if you creating, we can see how we can create a VM in Azure. So in Azure you will be creating a VM directly from there, and you will be launching that after you fill a certain set of boxes. We can look into that later, but here the term is called the launch instances. So when I click on launch instances, similar to Azure, Amazon offers the type of presets that I can choose. So if you look into here, some of the services have this free tier eligible there. So if you select this one, then you are safe. So if you select something else, like for example this Amazon RDS, this is a costly one. So if you select this one, you will be get charged automatically. So you have to make sure that if you are using a free subscription, not subscription, free account in Amazon, because there is no concept of subscription here, free account in Amazon, you have to make extra careful, so that you can always select this one, free tier eligible one, so that you won't get charged. So we can later create this particular VM. Right now we can focus on other things. So we were discussing about the way by which we can create a particular a free account in this Azure and Amazon. So the way by which you are going to create the free account is like you can click on the start free. So let's open this in an incognito window. Okay. And okay, and let's click on the start free. So here you have to sign up by providing your providing all the you first need an Outlook account as well. So I have already created that, so I am not going into details about how to create, but I can mention a few of the things that you need to be aware of while creating this particular Azure account. First of all, you need an this live Outlook account that you can sign up for free, and you have to sign in with that particular account, and your particular Azure account will be tied to that particular Outlook account. Next, you have to fill up a series of fields, and one of the main thing to remember is like you have to provide the credit card information. So this is used by Microsoft for validating that you are using the Azure service only once and not later. So if you sign today, you will get around 12 months of free services plus a first month of $200 to your account. But what happens is, after the 12 months, if you provide again that same credit card information and your account, your email, so Microsoft won't allow you to create those kind of things. So this will be difficult if you are going to use the Azure services after this particular period, after these 12 months. So for that, either you need to pay for the Azure account. You can select a pay as you go subscription, or you can choose some of the subscriptions, like MSTN subscription offers you some of the free benefits from Azure. So you can use that as well. So when you log into the login with an account with an MSTN subscription, similar like we are viewing here, a kind of a subscription model called the free account. So Azure will automatically show another one, like for example, okay, I can I can create a new web app and show you. So I'm going to create a new resource in Azure. So right now I have only free trial, but if you are login to the Azure with a account that has MSDN subscription enabled, so that will show automatically like Microsoft Visual Studio Professional or Microsoft Visual Studio Enterprise, and based on that particular model of subscription, you will get additional benefits as well. Or you have to choose a pay and score. So if you are providing your credit card and you are going to pay for it, so that will be based on a pay as you go subscription. So whatever options, there are different ways by which you can use the services. So another way by which you can use this particular Azure services for learning purpose is you can go to here like Microsoft Learn, and you can click here. So you have to log in with your Microsoft Outlook account. So there are a lot of different learning modules that are provided by Microsoft itself. So some of these modules have the sandboxes built in with it. So the sandboxes allow you to create the Azure environment on the fly, so you don't have to pay anything for that. So that is a free sandbox that is provided by Azure. So that is another option by which you can use the Microsoft Learn to create this kind of this kind of sandbox environment, so that you don't have to pay for that. So this Learn is a good website for learning the different technologies out there. So you can explore this particular website for understanding the different not just Azure, there are different other concepts as well that are related to .NET. So all of things you can learn from this particular website called the Learn. So it is better to use this for learning. There are also other learning resources are out there, and some of the services like the Pluralsight and the Cloud Guru, they provide kind of a lab environment by which you can spin up an Azure, and they provide credits as well. But the problem there is you have to pay a fixed amount of money for using those services. So this one, Microsoft Learn, is free and you can straight away use that. So similar way you can create an account in Amazon as well. So the steps are basically same. You have to provide a credit card for this purpose. So I think either Amazon, I am not sure about that, either Amazon or Azure don't support the debit card, so you have to provide the credit card only. And once you create an account, you will be reached a page like this. So this is the page you will get after you sign in. So you can see all the different things. So the good thing is that everything is there from the single location in case of Amazon. For example, if you want to see the different services, you can click here and you can see all the different services out there. And similarly, if you want to view any account related information or the billing dashboard or such kind of thing, you can view that as well. But in the case of Azure, you have to if you have to go to that particular different menu. So the menus, or you can type here. So if you are not familiar with any of the resources or particular menu, you can straight away okay, this cost management and billing, and you can go there and you can understand all the different things. So billing account and all the things. So we can take a break for 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, and then we can come back and we can continue with the rest of the things. So please stay with the session. So let's put a timer here, okay, for 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, we are back with the session. Let's continue. So we were talking about the different different options by which we can spin up the cloud resources. And one more thing I want to mention here is, like, if you want to have a particular favorite service to bookmark, you can do that very easily using this option. Like, you can click on here. For example, if I want to open this EC2 instances always, I can bookmark this. So the advantage of bookmarking is that just like we bookmark a particular web link and we easily access that via this Chrome browser or whatever way, a similar way we can bookmark the services that we want to access easily. So we can straight away get the service from there. So also, in case if you lost, if you don't have any services that are bookmarked in favorites, you can still use this search. So that is a very useful and quite fast search that are provided by both the services like the Azure as well as Amazon. So let's see, we can search for a particular, for example, if I want to spin up some big data related thing, so I can click here. So and it will automatically show all the associated services that are part of the big data. So maybe based on the search capability, it may not show exactly equal, but you can still use. For example, if I want to if I am going to develop an application, or if I have an application that uses the relational database, that is the SQL Server as the database, and I want to host that in this Amazon, I can search that called the SQL Server. So it automatically highlights underneath which particular service that belongs, or which category that particular service belongs. So SQL is all part of this RDS. So this is another difference. We can check that a bit later after we talk a bit about the different regions and availability zone concepts that are used in this cloud. We can straight away go to here, but the idea here is, if you are not familiar with any service, you can just type one or two keywords related to that service and it straight away shows that, and then you can click that here and goes to that particular page. You don't have to look into all these searches one by one and find out. You can straight away use this search. And once you identify that a particular service that you are going to use constantly, you can bookmark that as well. And the advantage is that bookmarked service will automatically highlighted on the left hand side. So this option is also there in Azure as well, but maybe in a different way. I haven't tried that. So there is a provision in Azure as well equally for that purpose, for you can bookmark a particular resource. Let's say we can search for storage account. Let's see any provision is there. Okay. Okay. See all resources. Storage account. Okay. Think somewhere else some provision is there, so that you can bookmark that and show that here. So or you can straight away use this. For example, if you want to use the SQL SQL Server database, you can search that and it highlights all the different things out there. SQL databases, Azure SQL, and all these different things. So see, it is intelligently showing all the different options. Like, for if I want to use SQL Server, I have the different options, like either a combination of these different services I can use, or not combination, either of these services I can choose, or I can spin up a virtual machine and with a SQL Server inside that virtual machine and straight away use that. So that is a kind of a the category called the infrastructure as a service, but the problem is you have to pay for that infrastructure as well as the SQL Server. The ideal way is to go for a software as a service. So there are three models which we can use in cloud development, and we will discuss that in this session a bit later. So the ideal strategy is to use something like a software as a service, but not at all times we can go with that kind of service. For example, if you are using an old version of SQL or whatever resource that is not compatible with this Azure, or Azure is not providing some Azure or whatever cloud services you are using, if it is that service is not providing any such particular kind of service, then the next backup plan is to create a particular virtual machine, and you can install that particular software inside that virtual machine and straight away use. So I can explain that concepts once again here. For example, if you have, let's say, if you have an application that tracks the employee details, okay, it's not a exact example, but you can understand the concept here, that it is using a set of dependencies. This track employee details is having a set of certain dependencies. So one of the dependencies we can call, it's like, for example, Oracle database. So it is using an Oracle DB. So the problem here is that as this application use this Oracle DB, when we move this is a on-premise based application, that was traditionally developed a few years ago. So now cloud is getting popular, and your organization wants to convert this into a particular cloud vendor. And for example, if you are choosing this particular Azure for that purpose, there may be different other providers that are capable with this, but for understanding the examples, let's say we are using this Azure for the moment, and we have to host this. So the one way by which you can do is you have to convert this. So this is the DB part. So we are not having any particular DB service here. For example, if you search for Oracle, so there is no provision for that. So the only option which you can do in Azure is you have to spin up a virtual machine, and you have to install the Oracle database inside that particular virtual machine, and then your application can use that. But the disadvantage is that you are paying for the virtual machine as well as for the that particular Oracle license as well, if it is a licensed software. So as far as possible, one should always go with the software as a service approach, like something like for example, this is on such service like Redis, Azure Cache for Redis. So this is not a pure database, but not a relational based database. It's a key value store, but you can you can imagine it to be like a kind of a service which you are going to use, like just like the Oracle. And if you are going to use this particular software as a service, the advantage is that the cost will be much lesser when compared with creating a particular VM and installing that particular software inside that VM and then using it. So you can instead of that, you can straight away use this ready-made service which is provided by the Microsoft Azure or whatever cloud provider, and then you can use that. But as you don't have that option right now, then the only way by which you can move this application to cloud is you have to move all these things. You have to reduce the infrastructure cost and everything. So you can spin up an application virtual machine in cloud, and then you can install this Oracle DB inside that virtual machine, and then you can connect your application to that particular area. And the software development is like a kind of a constantly evolving on. So you are going to evolve that particular application to make it compatible more with the cloud and to reduce the cost. So your aim is to convert this into a software as a service based application, or not application. So it is more to be compatible with the software as a service. So what you can do is, at a later point of time, you can incrementally develop or alter this particular Oracle DB to something else that are compatible in cloud, and incrementally you are going to use the use some kind of service. So in the long run, maybe you are going to either use, for example, it may not be this way, but you can understand that your track this particular track details will be added to a particular app service in Azure, and this particular Oracle DB, you will be converting that to a particular different DB, like something like Azure SQL or something. And so this means your application is now cloud compatible, and you can straight away you can use this in different platforms as well. And by converting this way, the advantage you get is, like, for example, if you want to spin up the DB to a bit higher level, you can straight away scale that as well. And also, in case if you want to extend this particular application into a set of certain microservices, for this application, microservice may be an overkill, but the idea here is, if it is a monolithic application like this one, you can convert that into different smaller microservices later that can be hosted in different other services. So all those options is provided by this cloud vendors. So we can dive a bit more into what all resources are provided by these cloud vendors to support the microservice based development. We will look into that a bit later, but the idea here is there is always a possibility by which you can split these things into different services, smaller modular services, and split it into different microservices and use that. Now, I hope you got the idea. So now there is no such service here. So the only way by which we can connect to your Oracle way is to spin up a virtual machine and then connect. Similar way, let's search in this AWS. Let's see any provision is there. So we can connect. So okay, in AWS, in the RDS section, Oracle is provided by them. So you can create a relational database in this particular Amazon Web Services, and you can choose the Oracle as the provider. So this is another difference you can see. So if you look into this option, the way by which we are going to create a relational database varies differently for these two platforms. For example, if in Azure, if I want to spin up a Microsoft SQL relational database, I can search that and I can use that particular SQL database straight away from the menu. So this is a particular service. But in the case of the Amazon, this particular service is wrapped inside a top level container called Amazon RDS. So this holds different this is a kind of a multi-model relational database. Means once you create a database, so for example, I can click on create database, and the next option which it will show is to from this Amazon perspective is what type of database we want to create, or to be exact, what type of relational database we want to create. So there are different kinds of relational database out there. This is Oracle. So in the earlier example we just discussed, Oracle is a requirement, so we can straight away go to Oracle. And if your application wants an SQL server, you can take that. So this is a different way when compared with that of Azure. So here you have to search and select that particular service straight away, but here we selected a relational RDS initially and then select a model differently. So there are different ways by which we can create the database. So you can just be aware of these things while working on these different types of platforms. So now the trend is like going for a multi-cloud model. Some organizations are already using a particular cloud vendor like either Microsoft Azure or maybe Amazon. But as in the future, maybe more and more cloud vendors come into scene. Now Google is also picking up. We will be having a session a bit later with the Google that can discuss about the different Google concepts, and we can relate that with some other cloud vendors as well. So probably I will be taking a session soon so I can book. So please check with please subscribe to this channel, and you can straight away get notification as well. So when different cloud vendors are getting more and more popular, there is a scope that the organization can move to a particular cloud vendor or a different one as they wish. So, and in some cases, the another one reason why this multi-cloud model is adopting by certain organizations is like, for example, if one cloud vendors goes down, we can use the other cloud vendor and we can serve the customers without affecting them, or without having a downtime. Usually, while developing for cloud, we exercise maximum caution to include all the necessary precautions like the redundancy and the geo replication and everything. So in spite of all this, if a particular service vendor goes down, and there are occasions where different cloud vendors goes down in such a way, so there is a possibility that in the near future this multi-cloud approach will be getting more popular, so that if one service goes down, the other one can pick up. So the most important thing to be aware while developing an application in this kind of a multi-cloud approach is like, you have to be extra careful so that you don't have any kind of a vendor lockdown in place while creating application. So if you look into this kind of services here, this Amazon MySQL MariaDB. So here this Amazon Aurora provides a lot of extra features, but there is in some blogs it is written that it will have a certain dependency to a particular platform. In this case, it should be with the Amazon. Similar way, each cloud vendors provides their own customized version of resources or applications, which you can, or of course you can use that based on your requirements and your flexibility. But if you are going for a multi-cloud model, and in future if you want to switch to a different one, then have to be extra careful to avoid a vendor lockdown. Otherwise there won't be any possibility to move that. For example, if there is some other service, we don't have to relate anything with this kind of services, but imagine if there is some other service like X on or something, and we are going to use that, and later so they are increasing the charge or something, and you have an option that, okay, if I go to another cloud provider I can use that, but still the problem is like you won't be able to move that easy if you are choosing a vendor lockdown based app kind of a resource. So you have to then the only possibility is you have to pay the money and you have to continue using that particular service, because there is to move away from that particular resource you have to pay a lot of money, or for the development purpose and other things you have to spend a lot of money, and the cost will be much higher. So to avoid that, you will stick with that particular service as it is. But the thing is, if you be aware of this thing like the vendor lock and such kind of thing, it will be good to consider that at the earlier stages of development. So we were discussing about the different things now. Hope you understand the ways by which the relational database is created in the Amazon Azure, as well as the Microsoft Azure, as well as the Amazon Web Services. Let's create a database here as well. So we can the steps are quite simpler. You can select a particular service, in this case SQL database. Select the subscription is disabled. Let's see what happened. Okay, Some issues happened there, I think. Okay. So you can check that later, and actually it's a free account. Okay, let's say. Okay, we can continue with the rest of the session, and we can check that a bit later. Some issues there, we can always check that a bit later, so we can continue with the session. So now we can understand a bit about the region concepts in the Azure, and not just in Azure, this Azure as well as in the Amazon. So imagine you are going to use a resource in Azure. Okay, so let's say a storage, and you want to use that storage service from Azure, and similarly you can relate that with the other one as well, S3 storage in Amazon as well. So you are going to store this, you are going to create a bucket in case of S3, which is the container for holding all the files, as well as for Azure storage you will be also using a similar concept called the containers, and you have to provide information to the cloud storage, that cloud provider, that where you want to store that particular file. So this is important because certain applications may have this data protection requirements and other things. So based on the customer requirement, you should be aware of where you want to store your particular data in cloud. So even though we can consider this as a general cloud, in the case of cloud there are different regions. So if you search for Cloud Harmony and Azure regions, they straight away shows a list of regions, or we can straight away Azure regions. Okay, so there are different regions out there. So I'm right now in India, so I have the region like the Central India, South India, West India. Similarly for different other locations, there are different other regions as well. So that is the concept of regions. So this cloud provider, based on that particular geographical area, they create a boundary, and that boundary is called as region. So the idea is, if you choose a particular boundary, like if I choose something like South India, so this South India region will have an associated data center in place, and we will be storing our particular resource inside that particular data center. But we don't have much clue about where actually this cloud provider are storing this or where their data center is. So they are providing a location like location Chennai, but we are not sure exactly about that thing. So if you look into the Azure portal, you won't get any details about those kinds of things. For example, if you are creating a service here, like let's say create a web app in Azure. Okay, let's say we don't have to create the resource, but let's see the region, so you can understand the concept here. So let's see the regions here. So here there are different regions out there. So if I am choosing I'm going to host my web application, maybe my React application in a particular location, and if I want to choose a location that is very close up to me, so right now because I am in India, I can search a location like India. Okay, Southeast Asia, that is the nearest thing. So I can choose that. So that will ensure that my web application will remain in that particular region. Now Now, within that particular region, there is a concept called availability zones. So this is also equally important. So when you select a particular region, Azure will automatically show the availability zone as well. So what this availability zone means that, for example, if you have, let's take paint and I can show you. Let's say, okay. Let's say you have a region like this. It can be called Southeast Asia or something like that, and there may be another region as well, like this can be something like Europe or something like that. Europe. Then this is kind of a region. Let's type it here. So South. South Asia or something, let's say, and this can be Europe or something. So you will you can understand the concept. So within this each regions there is a concept called the availability zones. Means that within each region there will be a kind of a holder called the availability zone. That means that each one of these availability zones have their own independent cooling and power requirements. So if one particular availability zone fails, because it have a copy, because your resource have a copy in another availability zone, automatically your customers will be served from that location behind the scenes. So that is the concept there. So this for production purpose, when you select a resource, it is better to enable the availability zone as well. You can always create a resource without the availability zone, but it is always better to create the availability zones, because in that way you can ensure that your application will be working properly in an live environment. Imagine if this particular cloud resource has some problem, and if there is no availability zone copies available, then the entire application will be down. So to avoid that, it is always recommended to create a particular resource resource in an availability zone. So for that purpose, it is always suggest to create a resource in a particular zone. So let's say we can open a resource here and here. 1 second, let's say. Okay, we can create some other resource. Let's see whether it is working or not. Let's create a function app. Let's see. So the entire subscription is disabled. It's strange. So again, somehow it's get locked. So okay, I can explain the concept here, and I can show that similar in the Amazon, so that way you can understand. So S3, for example, if I am going to create a S3 bucket here, so the equivalent of this is the Azure storage here, Azure storage. So the concept here is in Azure storage, when you create an Azure storage, you will be having a container and you will be having a multi-model. Like you can either select a kind of a file-based storage, you can select a blob-based storage, or you can have a queue as well in the Azure storage. Whereas in Amazon, there is only one service called the S3, but you always have the option to store a queue in Amazon, but that will be in a different service. I can explain that concept here. So this storage concept, so now we are going into the storage concept here. So as we understand a bit about the different general concept of Azure, like the regions and the availability zone. So region is the way by which these cloud providers divides these particular categories, particular areas into different regions, so that you will be having the option to store your particular resource in a particular region, and inside that region there will be different availability zones as well, so that if one availability zone goes down, that resource will be served from another location. So that is the idea behind availability zone. But to choose an availability zone, you need to have a premium subscription, so that's not provided in the free subscription of the Azure or the Amazon. You have to choose a pay as you go plan, and have to choose a different option for that purpose. Now let's understand what's the difference in terms of this Azure storage with regards to the Amazon S3. So let's open another notepad and I can explain the difference between that. Let's say this is Amazon Web Services, then in this case this is Azure. Okay, so as you are an application developer, you may be familiar that you may want to store the data. So the data can be a relational data. It can be some forms of files or blob storage or whatever kind of queue or something. So leave the relational storage now, because we already covered that a bit earlier when we covered the this relational database systems in RDS services and the particular different kinds of SQL services in Azure. But imagine if you want to store some files or different image files or something as part of your web application in cloud. So there are different options. So in the case of Amazon Web Services, it will be called the S3. So this is the traditional form of a service that Amazon had when they earlier started this particular platform. And in the case of Azure, it is called as Azure Storage. So here there is a difference when we say we can't map it equally to these things. For example, if there is a website called Map Services of Azure to Amazon, something like that. Yes, Cloud Service Map. Not this one. Similar service. Okay. Azure to. Okay. Okay, so here it is mentioned that storage account or S3 simple storage account, the service is raised in region specific in account. So we okay, this is the Microsoft Azure storage account and this is the S3 simple storage account, but there is a difference other than this one. It's not exactly we can't exactly map a particular Azure storage account to an Amazon S3, because there is a difference. Because when you say S3, you have the option to choose a particular blob which can be of any file. That's a flat file. Okay, it's kind of an one second. Okay, it's a kind of a flat file system and it's highly available as well, S3. So it's very cheap as well. So that's why many application development is going in favor with the S3. Then in Azure storage, when you create an Azure storage, there will be 4 types of services that are created behind the scene. Like one is the file shares, then the tables, then the queues, and then the blobs. So this is the difference. So when you create an Azure storage, you have it's kind of a multi-model by which you can have any of these. You can or you can use a combination of all these different types of storage services. But if you are choosing creating an S3, you have the option to create a blob, which is a flat file and which is highly available and cheap. So this one, Azure storage, is also highly available and that is cheap as well. But this is the concept. There is a multi-model concept here. So hope you imagine hope you understand that earlier when we created an RDS service in this Amazon Web Service, you understood that this Amazon RDS service is a kind of a multi-model where you have the provision to create a SQL or an Oracle or a PostgreSQL or MySQL or whatever kind of type of databases underneath, whatever type of relational databases under this particular RDS category. So similar way, this in Azure, when we create an Azure storage, we can create the different types of storages like the file or shares or table or queues or blob. Now you may be thinking, okay, this as we create the as S3, we only have the provision to store a blob which is a flat file. So how will we storing this queue and the table structure? So for that there are equivalent services, but you have to create that separately in the Amazon Web Services. So the equivalent is, if in the case of the file shares, for example in this Azure storage you have the concept of file share, so the equivalent on will be in the Amazon will be kind of an EFS or elastic file share. And similarly the tables, for the tables thing in Azure, the equivalent in Amazon will be like the Amazon AWS DynamoDB. So similar way, the queue service, there is a service called SQS, and this blob that is equivalent to S3. So that's the difference. So different cloud providers are considering the resource in a different way, considering the services they provide in a different way. So that is the reason why in this difference is there. So you have to be aware of these kind of things. So if you are developing an application, how you will be contacting with this particular resources, in the case of Amazon or the Azure storage, how your application going to be interact with the particular thing. So one way by which they can interact with the this particular web services is through the REST API, which we discussed earlier. But there is another way by which we can interact your applications, not the humans. I am not meaning the humans interact, how you interact with this particular service. For example, if you are creating a S3 bucket here, let's create an S3 bucket here. And can understand how it looks like, because we are now logged into the Azure due to some subscription issues, which might be something related with my payment information or something. Let's see how we can create a similar on in Azure, Amazon, and see how it goes. So bucket name here. So you have to provide a bucket name here. For example, let's create demo bucket, and then let's see, then we have to select an AWS region. So this is the concept which I explained earlier. This explains where you want to store your particular data. So I can select a different area. So hope you have noticed another one difference with regard to Azure. So here you have the option, you have the view where to get view, you get the view where your where in which place your data is actually storing. So this Asia Pacific, it means Mumbai, and this Asia Pacific means it's Singapore. But in the case of Azure, if you open that and let's check a region, they will show only that particular region name, and we won't get a picture directly from the portal where it is actually going to store. So here, see these categories: Australia, Central, and this kind of Southeast Asia. We are not sure where this Southeast Asia means. It can be on different cities. So that's the another insight we get from here. But this is not any worthy information here, because we can't do anything by knowing that particular cities or something, because we don't have any direct access to those data centers with this kind of information. But still, that's the difference you can notice. Just for that point I mentioned it here. So you can select a region that is closer to you. So that is the recommended approach. And then there are different options by which you can put some security in for this bucket. For example, if if you allow everyone to access this particular bucket, so there is a possibility for ransomware and such kind of malicious attacks that can happen. So to avoid that, it is recommended to block all public access and open only as per the policies what you require. Then you have the option to choose the bucket versioning as well. So if you enable this, if you are storing multiple copies of that same file, you can programmatically identify that thing as well. So that is what it is mentioned here. So it allows this, by turning on this option, it allows to keep multiple variants of an object in the same bucket. So the why we are storing that is it have a different purpose, like if you want to retrieve or restore or every version of object, we can use that. If you want to change that to a previous version with versioning enabled, you can do that. You can do that programmatically from your application. Then the tags allow to categorize your particular storage. So if you have a set of buckets that are belonging to this account, and if you want to categorize by your project name, for example, if I have a project name something like okay, let's say project as key and value is something like demo or something, you can do that. And similar way you can add other tags as well, you can always add the departments there, and you can provide a value like there. So this way you can categorize your particular resources that are belong to a particular thing. So these are optional, there is no need to include that, but this will be a good practice. Then the encryption is another important thing to be aware of. Like your data should be need an encryption at rest, so that none of the other persons will be able to access that particular data directly. So you can enable that here. So there are two provisions here. One is to use the Amazon S3 native option for encryption, so that Amazon will automatically provide all those things. An encryption key that S3, this is managed by Amazon and uses photo. So Amazon is providing that key and uses it automatically updating and all those things behind the scene. The another option is you can provide a custom key. So some applications maybe have that requirement, so you can choose that, and you have to provide the key, either the key from these areas. So this is called the key management service. So this is another service from the Amazon, called the AWS Key Management System, or KMS. The similar service you can see in the Azure is called this Key Vault service. Key Vault service. So if I open the Key Vaults, okay, we can, I think we won't be able to create a Key Vault now. I can show in another demo how all these functions, but sorry for this that I won't be able to show this thing, but I can make you understand about what this Key Vault is providing. This provides this is a service from Azure that allows you to store any particular configuration values or keys that you don't want to store in your application in your application source code. If you store some sensitive information with your application source code, there is a high probability that someone may be reading that and do malicious actions with that particular information. So the recommended practice is you have to store your particular keys in this Azure Key Vault, and your application should read from this particular Key Vault. So how your application going to authenticate with this Key Vault is through an idea of called a managed identity. So that concept is also important, this managed identity. So I will copy all these things later and provide you. So the idea is like the Key Vault. Let's focus on the Key Vault here. So before Key Vault, let's see how we are going to store the data, store the configuration value. So imagine if you have a web app and your web app going to access the DB. Let's say it's an Azure SQL DB, or or in another way, it can be an Amazon RDS, SQL DB, whatever. So to connect your web app to these things, you will be having your connection string with you. Okay, connection string. So that connection string is a kind of a sensitive information. So if someone has access to that connection string, they may be able to connect with using a tool like this SQL Management Studio or whatever client type of tools they can use, or they can even programmatically connect to this particular DB, and they can delete or they can update the DB. So you don't want to do that. So your connection string you have to provide only with the authorized person. So in the case of in the traditional development model, the problem usually happens is like with your application, you have that configuration file with you, which stores all these values, like the connection string and everything. Now we will be storing this particular connections application and the configuration file, which can be a text file. Inside that we will be having this connection string. So we'll be storing all this thing in a source control, maybe JIT or something. So the problem with this approach is that anyone who is having access to this particular JIT will be able to read this connection string, and they can note that down, and they can connect it from a different tool or application and can do whatever they like. So to avoid that, the way by which Azure and the other cloud providers recommend is like you have to store this connection string in Key Vault. So in Key Vault we have the provision to store secrets, certificates, and the one more thing is there, keys. Yeah, keys is there. So this is your encryption key. Okay, so secrets, we create a new secret, you have to secret is a kind of a key value pair, so you can provide like this a DB connection string or something, and you can provide the secret connection string from cloud vendor here. So this way your keyboard will be storing this secret inside that secret. So let's look into the EBS as well. So the equivalent, so that is related to this thing we defined is related to this Azure Key Vault. Okay, so we can create different kinds of secret. We can create multi secrets. So secrets are simply kind of a key value pair, but only the application will be allowed to view these secrets and none else. So this will be allowed to only for authorized users. And we also have the provision for certificates, which acts like a kind of a way by which your application ensures that it is authorized to access a particular resource. So we can also store the certificates like HTTPS. If your web application has an HTTPS certificate, you can store that in Azure Key Vault, and it will automatically it can deploy to the particular underneath related resources. If you automate that, then there is a provision for storing the encryption key as well. So that same thing is what we are viewing here. Like if you want your data in the in this particular this bucket to be encrypted, either Amazon will manage by its own, or if your application has a custom requirement that you have to provide a custom required key for that purpose, then you can store that here in the Amazon, not here. This is Key Vault. So Key Vault is a generic service. So I think this Amazon doesn't support that Key Vault to access directly. Azure Key Vault is not allowed to access directly, but it won't be able to read from Azure Key Vault. But the other option is like Amazon Key Management Service. This is Key Management Service or KMS, and your application can access the particular key from this location. So let's see how a KMS service can be created. So I hope you understand the concept. Then there are some we were discussing about this particular bucket concept where we are going to store the demo, store the particular bucket. So let's create that and we can continue with the next service. So there are set of other advanced settings. So if you are not sure about that, let's leave it default. Let's click on create bucket. So the problem here is okay, the bucket with the same name already exists. So let's add a different name here, like Thiruvananthapuram demo. Let's see whether that bucket is available or not. So default encryption. Let's disable this encryption for the moment. We don't want encryption because okay. Let's create it. So now the Amazon has successfully created the bucket. Okay. So I can click on here. And I can straight away upload a file to this particular bucket. For example, I can either drag and drop the file, or I can choose a file from a particular location. For example, if I have okay, so let's this be the file I want to upload, which is the banner I used for this session. So let's upload that and click upload. So that got uploaded. Okay. So it's succeeded. So now your program can access these particular files. How your application will be going to access this particular file is through either through a REST interface. You can always access that, but the recommended approach is to use something like the, let's save it. I can provide all that in that particular, so you can in case if you want to refer, you can use that as well. So this is the one for RDS, sorry, S3 is Azure storage. Okay, so let's say now we have a file in our location, that is the S3 bucket, or in the other case it can be in Azure storage blob location. So the concept is similar. Now your application want to access this particular S3 bucket and this particular file. So how it is going to access? So there are multiple ways. One way is by which you can use an HTTP REST API that is provided by this particular cloud vendor. So based on the cloud provider you are using, either Amazon or Azure, you can use that. Then the other way by which you can access this thing is like use a NuGet package. In case of this particular, which one, that if you are using a .NET, if you are a .NET developer, .NET developer, then you can add a NuGet package for accessing this S3, and behind the scene that NuGet package will be triggering those details. But for that part, your application to access this S3, there needs an authentication. It has to pass a certain authentication as well. So for that you have to provide a storage key and secret. So this is an important concept. So for that purpose, you can click on here, your account details, click on here, and you can click on my security credentials. Let's open that page and see. So here you can okay, oh sorry, it's not this one. Okay, this one, this access key. So let's delete the older access key. So to delete that, we need to confirm that, deactivate and then delete it. Okay, so to create a new access key, you can click on access key, and then you can always click on show access key. Now this recording is going on, and someone with this access key can directly access this particular resource. So you are going to use this access key ID and this secret key in your application. This access, both the access ID and this secret key in your application to connect to this particular S3, and with that key you will be able to do whatever operations you want. Like you want to store something in this S3 bucket, you can create a kind of a hierarchy. There is no folder concept, it's like a kind of a hierarchy, like if this is folder 1 / folder 2 2/ the file.jpg. so this can be considered as a kind of a folder structure, but actually it's not a folder structure, it's kind of a hierarchical structure with a flat file structure, and that is what we are going to use in S3. That way we are going to define in S3. Now with this storage key and secret, not storage key, let's comes access key ID and secret access key, your application will be able to connect to this particular cloud service, in this case Amazon, and that way you can connect. So how you want to connect? So as an application developer who listening this session, you might be thinking about how you can connect your application to this particular storage. So the way by which you can do that is you can search for Azure AWS SDK tools, or you can always do a Google search, like how to connect a particular application, particular type of application. To your application can be in any language, it can be in C++, Go, Java, or JavaScript. So let's say .NET. So how we can use this particular SDK and everything is there, and there are a lot of other articles are also provided by the Amazon. There is a good set of documentation provided by Amazon, so you can use that to connect these things. So there are certain samples as also .NET code sample. Let's click on that. Okay, see this kind of step-by-step code samples are out there. In addition to that, you can also go to learn.amazon and you can learn that as well. So this is the way by which your application is going to connect. So there are different options. You can connect from a PHP application with this SDK for PHP. So this SDK or software development kit is the way by which your application is going to access. But if you are a DevOps person, how you will be interacting with the cloud is either through that CLI, which we discussed at the beginning of the session. You will be interacting with the cloud through this CLI tools, which can be installed on your machine, or you can install that in your or you can use that straight away from that portal itself, and you can interact with the client. But sometimes as a DevOps person, DevOps, or even in some cases as a developer, you want to do a certain set of things in this cloud providers. In that case, you can make it as a script which do a certain set of actions, like action 1, action 2, action 3, and so on up to a level, and then you can put that as a script there, and you can put it can be a PowerShell script, like a PowerShell script.ps1, and once that script is there, you can store that inside some location like a GitHub or something, or whatever repository you are comfortable with. It can be Git repo or Azure DevOps or whatever, or a storage location, S3 or S3 in the case of Amazon, or it can be an Azure storage area. And next step is we open that CLI tool, and we will be downloading that particular or opening that particular PS1 file and execute the CLI file directly from there. So this way you are interacting with the file. So the advantage of having this kind of PowerShell script for different things is like you can automate it later as well. So that is the concept there. But if it is a simple command or something, you don't have to write a script like this. You can straight away do that from a CLI. But from the case of application, the things is a bit different. Your application may be hosting in an environment like the Azure App Service or equivalent in S3 and equivalent in Amazon, and your application may need to constantly connect, or in some way it needs to connect to your S3 bucket. So in that S3 or whatever storage you are using, so in that case, for it needs for the purpose of authentication and other purpose, it can use a storage key and a secret and use the NuGet package and connect to this. So the other problem here is where you want your storage key and secret to be stored. So it can be stored inside that EBS, not EBS, EKS, Elastic Key Management Service. Sorry, not that one. 1 second. Forgot. KMS, sorry, not EKS, so it's like a KMS, Amazon Key Management Service. So you can use that, and you can store your secret key and the secret ID or whatever confidential information there, and your application can use that. So how your application is going to connect to this particular key management service, because it needs to retrieve those secrets from there. For that purpose, you can use a kind of a way by called managed identity. So you create an identity in Azure. So we won't able to cover all those things today in this session. So the idea here is, in Azure you create an app registration and a managed identity, and you will configure those things, and that way your system will be able to contact your particular key management service with a certificate in place. So that is the secret key, and that ensures that authentication and authorization and all things are evaluated, and then the key management service allows your application to read a particular secret key from this particular service, and that way you can use the service in your, you can use that particular key in your application. So that these are the different ways by which you can confidentially store this information. So let's move ahead. We want to cover a few more other things as well. So let's have a break now for 10 minutes, and we will come up again with some other concept. We will be checking a bit about the Azure storage more, and we have to also understand the concept of redundancy, this failure, recovery and failure, as well as different other concepts that are related to storage, how we can have that backup and everything, and what are the different tools that we can use to connect to this particular Azure storage. So here we directly interacted with the bucket through the portal. So there are a couple of other tools as well that can be used for connecting, so that can be also discussed. So please hold on. So I will be continuing the session after 10 minutes. Okay, welcome all. So we were discussing about the ways by which your application can access to the S3 over the Azure storage for the blob and file access. And we also were understand the different concepts of the storage and the differences between Azure storage as well as the S3. So if you're not aware about those things or not get a familiarity of that, you can always check the video for more details. So I explained all that previously in the session, before the break. So let's continue from here. As we were talking about the ways by which the application is connecting to the Azure storage. Next, we can understand a few scenarios where how our development members are going to access this Azure SDK. So not Azure SDK, this cloud S3 or whatever resource in cloud. It is not just particular for this S3 or Azure storage or EC2 or whatever. This can be compatible with, this can be think of as a way by which different types of users interact with your particular cloud service. So if you are a DevOps person, probably you might be using CLI or some form of tool to interact with the particular cloud service. It can be a web CLI or it can be it can be a web CLI or it can be an on-premise installed CLI. You can connect to the Azure or Amazon. So other way by which we can connect is through the PowerShell. Then the applications will be mostly interacting either through the SDK or through the REST interface, probably through an HTTPS channel. That way they can interact. So all those different things you can get from the documentation. Both Azure and Amazon provides excellent documentation by which your various programs can access these particular resources from two different cloud providers as we discussing in this session. So you can go through that. Similarly, like AWS, Azure also provides Azure documentation so that you can go through that, or you can search away Azure SDKs and tools. So you will get a familiarity of those things as well. So all those things are explained. So in some of the cases, it will be using the particular examples as well. It will be showing the particular examples as well. So you can follow that and understand. Other options can also rely upon. And then the Microsoft Learn, as I explained earlier, that is also another thing by which you can depend upon, which is a good resource for having all those different for learning the different concepts that we are going to use in cloud computing. So you can follow that as well. Now with regards to the tools, there are different tools in the terms of Azure. We will be already we discussed about the Azure CLI, which is a command line interface that you can use to connect. Then the Visual Studio provides some of the integration with this native integration with Azure as well as Amazon. So different plugins are provided, so you can use that to connect. Then if you want to manipulate or do some something on the files you are storing in the Azure containers, like containers in the, it's not Docker container, I mean in the storage container, you can use a tool called Azure Storage Explorer, which is a bit slow, but you can use that for connecting. So this is the tool. So here you can connect to your Azure account with a different way. So if you can always connect your Azure with your subscription. So it will list all the resources that are related to the storage here. You can also connect using a storage key and a secret. That is another way by which you can connect. So as we discussed earlier, Azure storage means it is a multi-model and it is a combination of queue, table and the file share, and as well as the container, blob container. So all these things you can process or do whatever things with this kind of tool, this Azure storage tool. So you can always rely upon. Then as explained in the documentation, Visual Studio also provides integration. So from inside Visual Studio, you can interact as well. Then the Azure Cloud Shell. Cloud Shell is the tool which we are discussed here. So you can click here and you can create that as well. Next, so where is that? Okay, not this one. Okay, then the Azure Data Studio, that is another tool. So if you installed that, you can use that also to connect, especially for purpose of that machine big data and other purpose. If you are using this Azure Data Studio, you can use that as well. Then Azure PowerShell we already discussed. Then Visual Studio Code. This is a lightweight editor from Microsoft, usually used for web development like React and Angular, and a lot of other development as well. It's very lightweight and it is supported on multiple environments as well. So you can use Visual Studio Code, and it has the option to install extension. So when you install the extension, it will basically extend the particular tool, so that if you install the Azure extensions that allow you to connect to Azure, you can use that. Then the Azure Batch Explorer, AZ Copy, these are tools used for copying the files to Azure. You can use that. Similarly in Mac also that is supported. So all the different things you can check here, as well as the different emulators are also supported. So these are the tools by which you are used. So emulator, the need for emulator is also worth discussing. Sometimes you are developing is using the Azure storage. Example, if your application is storing some files in Azure storage and do some processing and retrieving that processed file back, it will be difficult if you always connect to the Azure and do a debugging every time. So the better way is you can install this Azure storage emulator, which will be installed as part of default with Visual Studio. And then the next step which you can do is you can do a local debug, and it behaves the same way as a cloud storage. So you can do all the operations that you usually do in cloud, but your code will be targeting your code, how you are targeting your particular application to development environment or to the actual cloud environment is through the connection string or the connection key. So you can specify that. So the way by which you specify is use development equal to true. You specify that in the connection string, and then it will automatically pick that from your local machine. So the things I explained is from the point of view of .NET development perspective. So might be there will be a difference in case of yours. So you just check that and then you can understand. So all the details are there in the documentation. So the documentation is a good tool. So I hope that is clear. Application needs SDK to connect to the Azure or the whatever cloud, and the tools are used for manipulating the different activities in cloud. We can do that the same in the portal as well, and portal does a good support for those things, but you will find it easier to use these kind of tools when you develop the application instead of always going through the portal. That is why many of the integrations are natively provided in the respective IDs as well, so that give an easier way to interact with the cloud. Then the same goes for this Azure Amazon as well. They have also the different SDKs and the different ways, so and the different tools. So let's see some of the tools that are provided by Amazon. So this is the command line tool, which is called Azure CLI. So the one thing you can notice here is with respect to Azure is in case of Azure, there is only a single Azure CLI which can be extended to different other services. But in the case of Amazon CLI, you can see that based on the services they are extending, they have different other CLIs. For the serverless application, they have this CLI. For ECS, this one. Then for the AWS Amplify, this one. Then the EC2 MI tools, this one. PowerShell, AWS. So a bit of difference is there, but you hope you got the idea. So that is the way by which it is connecting. Then let's see some of the IDs that are supported by the AWS. So the Visual Studio is supported, Visual Studio Code is supported. So the one thing which you can do is you can do a search on that extensions which can be installed from the marketplace, and probably there will be extensions that are related to that particular cloud vendor. So these are multiple tools are supported. So this Azure DevOps is a tool which is used for tracking the entire activities of software development from the requirements up to the production, as well as testing and other things. Testing, then the tracking of things, then the deployment, then building, source control management, everything can be tracked off with Azure DevOps. So in case if your Azure DevOps want to deploy something to Amazon, so that support is there. So if you go into the, I think I mentioned this earlier in one session that is available in channel. So if you check that, we saw the different ways by which we can connect our build and deployment pipeline, possibly the probably the deployment pipeline to these different vendors. So we were mostly talking about at that time about the app service or something, but there is a provision for deploying that to this AWS as well, similarly to Google Cloud as well. So different ways are there, different supports are there, so you can check that as well. So let's see the front end web and mobile tools. So this is interesting. So these tools are supported. Then the SDKs are, see, this description gives you an idea. So SDKs take the complexity out of coding by providing language specific APIs for AWS service. So that's the advantage. So if you use this SDK in your based on the whatever type of language you used for development, it will be very easy. So I can explain on scenario. For example, if you are using a .NET Core application, you can install that .NET NuGet package, this Amazon SDK, into your .NET project. So it's kind of a NuGet package, and it's very simple to install. You just right click on that particular solution explorer, manage NuGet, and you search for AWS SDK for .NET, and it's a couple of confirmation steps, and then that is done. Your particular NuGet package is installed into your application. So using that particular SDK in the form of NuGet package, then your application will be able to connect to any of these Amazon services. In this case, S3 can be connected. So if it is having an identity management, it can be connected to AWS IAM. Then Amazon CloudWatch is another thing which is similar to logging purpose. So if your application want to log something, that can be used. AWS Lambda is kind of a function. It's similar to that serverless concept, where you bother only about the actual application code, and all the underlying infrastructure and everything will be managed by the Amazon itself. So that is the Amazon Lambda. So the equivalent of these things in Azure is called the Azure function. So in this session itself, there I want to say something, a few details about this AWS Lambda and how it differs from Azure. So we will be discussing that as we go through the session. Then the elastic compute services, EC2, those are virtual machines. So if you want your application to interact with some virtual machine, you can do that. Similar way, DynamoDB, Amazon EKS, that is the key management store, that can be connected. So there are a list of other services. So some of the main things are highlighted here. So, and you can always follow this SDK code examples as well. That can help you in understanding a bit more better, because these code examples, if you look into that, you can understand the concept much better than reading a documentation, and you can straight away use that in your code. So let's see some of the ways by which let's see the developer kit, how it looks like. Okay, so a lot of quick starts are there. Simple cross-platform application. Mostly you will be developing this using a .NET Core application that is cross-platform compatible. Yeah, so this is the package, NuGet package we are using. So all the required methods for connecting to this particular Amazon cloud services are provided by this SDK. So that is why we are adding this SDK. So once we add this SDK,
then it is simple like so. Say we create an instance of S3. For example, this is your application, and your application wants to connect to this S3 bucket. So you initially create an S3 client, then you provide all the other things like the bucket details and other things, and you show the things. So this is an example of creating a bucket. So if get bucket name of arc, you are providing a bucket name here, and if that bucket is not there in the Amazon S3 storage, so it will automatically create the bucket. So that is what it is displaying here. So they provide a lot of information there, so you can follow that and always do this kind of things, and always check these areas and clean up and all those things. So a lot of things are there, so you can check. Now we were discussing a bit about the way by which how we use SDK to connect. So this needs to use this SDK, you need a bit of development experience, but if you are using this type of tools, you don't need that much of development experience, because you can simply get the key from the Azure storage, like not Azure, sorry. So okay, so from here, from the my security credentials, and you can use these keys to connect to your particular storage. So this is particularly for Azure, to connect to Azure storage, but if you want to connect to Amazon, similar other tool will be there. Let's search for something, Amazon Storage Explorer. So you can search something like that. So there is a tool called S3 browser, which is a freeware which can be used for connecting. So all the files can be here. So from a development perspective, you have to be aware about the ways by which an external party is going to access this bucket, not just this bucket or the storage, all the other different other resources. You have to make required authentication and authorization in place. Otherwise, what happens is like some malicious user may access your particular resource and do things that you can. So the things which can break your application and can do potential harm as well. So always make it a point to put all the required security measures in place. Okay, so we covered a bit about the different different storage concepts. So I am just thinking about anything else needs to be covered. So different storage can be used for storing your files, your images, and whatever you like. The difference you noticed mainly from the perspective of Azure and Amazon is that the way by which they categorized their services. In Azure, the Azure storage is kind of a multi-model, and in Amazon it is a separate services. Each one is a separate service. So we'll be covering a bit more now, like, so suppose if your application wants to use the cloud, and same time it is in a situation where it is not allowed to connect to any of these cloud or internet. How are we going to handle that? So that is an interesting scenario. Example can be, think of like in submarine or in an area where internet is not allowed, but you still want to use all the different concepts in cloud, or some of the services in cloud. How can you do that? So that is the way by which we use kind of a machine. It's kind of a machine called the Azure Stack Hub, in the case of Azure. So if you search for Azure Stack Hub, let's search from the portal itself. Let's see if this is the one. No. Let's search Azure Stack Hub. Okay. Yeah, this one is the tool. It's basically a machine, but it does not have any access to internet or something, and it resides inside your on-premise area, and your applications can connect to this particular one. So this is the concept. This is the device. So similar way, let's see the equivalent in the Amazon, which is called the AWS Outpost. Okay, if you open that, so this is the device. This will sit inside your on-premise environment, and all the applications will be connected to here. So one thing needs to be, you might be thinking, is whether all the different features in this cloud, whether that is provided by this Amazon or the Azure, does this device support all those things? But not all the features, but nearly 80% of the features are supported. Like some of the most extreme important features, like the EC2, then the web app, the containers, and all the other things that are supported in this AWS Outpost as well as in the Azure Stack. Might be there is a change in the name called in Azure. So let's search Azure Stack Hub. It's not much documentation. Yeah, that is there. Azure Stack Hub. Yeah, this tool. Okay. So this is another difference. So if you look into this particular documentation, you can see that in the case of AWS, they have a device that looks somewhat similar like this. But in the case of Azure Stack Hub, Azure is partnering with these different vendors like the Cisco, Dell, or HP or Lenovo to integrate the Stack Hub and providing from there. So that is a difference. And see the other options. See, they have a marketplace that allows that device, Azure Stack Hub, to use any of the services from these different areas. So that is not applicable for majority of the scenarios, but in case if your application demands that it shouldn't access the internet, but still your not just your application, you can think of as an integrated environment where it is you are inside a particular organization, and can think of as a submarine or something, and you don't want to access, or you don't have access to the actual internet because of the constraints of that particular environment, and same time you want to access or you want to use all the features of cloud, then can go ahead with the this Azure Stack Hub, which is a way. I haven't used this, but just for the sake of understanding, I explained. Then the similar one is called the Azure AWS Outpost, so that this is also similar. And this can be think of as a disconnected device from the public interface, maybe from the internet or whatever. But this doesn't mean it is not able to connect to in case if your application, if this device wants to connect to a particular cloud or a VPC, there is provision by which you can enable that as well. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So you can open a particular virtual private network and can use that particular endpoint to connect from this device to that particular area. So that is another option which you can follow. Then let's understand about the different models we use in the cloud, which is often termed as SaaS, this IaaS, platform as a service, etc. So understanding about that is also helpful, because some of the services here like EC2 and the Azure virtual machines, they all comes under the category of infrastructure as a service, where you are actually spinning up a VM or an infrastructure, and you are responsible for creating those kind of VM, as well as for managing those kind of environments. So the responsibility is high. Though Azure provides or Amazon provides with the required infrastructure, still you are responsible for managing all the different things. So that is the concept with the IaaS, infrastructure as a service. So let's open the notepad and let's explain that a bit, but because understanding this might help you to understand the different cloud areas. So IaaS, so you can consider this as two extremes. So at last section, it can be considered of software say service. So this one is infrastructure as a service. Okay, so imagine if you have a traditional application, which can be think of as a monolithic application. There is no split of responsibility of or such kind of thing, and it's kind of a monolithic application. Everything is baked into one single application, and your organization is using this one. Okay, your organization is using this one, and you are moving to cloud. So that is the aim, you are moving to cloud. Now the ideal choice is, I explained this earlier, but again explaining this, the ideal choice is you should be able to straight away go to the software as a service, because in that case everything else, that is infrastructure configuration and everything, is managed by Azure or Amazon. You don't have to bother about, and you just have to bother about how your application is working and those sort of thing. So the ideal strategy is that, but because of the constraints by which your application is made, as it is made in a monolithic, as it is a monolithic application, and it is it's baked into a single way, you can't immediately go to this software as a service model. So we go incrementally first to infrastructure as a service. So for that purpose, you can create an Azure VM in the case of Azure, or Amazon EC2 in the case of Amazon, and then set up the environment. So here you need to set up all the environments, and dependencies. So the challenge is up to you. You have to bother all the things. So Amazon or Azure is providing the EC2 or VM for you, and they are managing the infrastructure and everything. But the environment setup and the dependencies means the software, the permissions and everything, and that needs to be taken care of by you itself. Then once we set up all those things, then we put our application hosted inside that VM application. In the case of web application, it is hosted VM, or maybe if it is a normal application, it will be run inside the VM. So this can be think of as a starting point if your monolithic application is not easy to transfer to this particular SaaS or the software as a service. But the way we should go forward is, from here we should move to a kind of a service called platform as a service, where it's a PaaS model, where some of the more responsibilities are handled by cloud vendors. Our cloud vendors handle all these kind of things, and the least responsibility, like how to run your application and everything. So that will be managed by your application. So you can focus on, the idea is you can focus more on application logic and how it's working. So from here the concept to go to SaaS, but in between there is a concept called the function as a service, where you it's a concept of serverless. So Azure functions and lambdas, AWS lambda comes in this place. AWS lambda, yeah, comes into this picture. So here it's actually we call that a serverless, in the sense that actually it has a server, and Azure and Amazon is managing all the servers behind the scene infrastructure, but we don't bother about anything. We just create a function and we add the necessary logic there, and we define how that function should work, mostly in terms of triggers. In functions concept it is called triggers, and then this particular your application, you may be having when you move your application from traditional to function as a service architecture, mostly it will be having a kind of a microservices architecture. So when I explain this point, don't fall into the assumption that every traditional application should be moved to microservices architecture. That is not the case, but think of this application as an extremely complex application which has the possibility for moving that into a microservice architecture. Then you can always move that into this microservices architecture, and in that case this Azure functions and AWS lambda, if you are using Azure, this Azure functions and the AWS lambda are good choice, because that allows your application, that allows you to easily spin up the application. And another advantage here is that you are focusing fully exclusively on that particular code and not even bother on the infrastructure or resources, and you can easily spin up as well. So that's the advantage. So if you convert this application to different smaller services, and each one is put into different Azure functions, that may not be the exact case as you think, but I hope you got the point what I mean. Like, you can split that into different services, and then you can put into Azure function, and then kind of a serverless model, so that you have the option to pay only for what you actually use, and you don't have to bother anything. So that is the advantage, and this is comparatively cheap compared to this IaaS as a service. But because of the constraint, we will not be able to move directly to this function as a service. So you should be aware of these things. And serverless is not suitable for all cases. Sometimes we have to kind of move to and stay in PaaS for some time. And if there is a provision by which we can convert that into software as a service. So the one example you can think of is Gmail, then this Outlook, all are software as a service. Then, and I think this Power BI is another software as a service model, where you can sign up for Power BI and you can use that particular Power BI into your application. So that is another way by which you can use the so you can move into the software as a service. So the least you pay, and this will be the specialized service. So in case if you want to, for example, imagine if you are spinning up a application for serving our email purpose, so it will be tough and it will be difficult. So that can be think of as compared to this IaaS model. But if you are directly paying for just what we want, take a Gmail and just straight away using that service, then that will be kind of an approach of software as a service. So these are two extremes. This IaaS and SaaS are two extremes we should be aware of. Then in addition to that, in the case of this function as a service, there is one more concept you need to understand. That is the concept of containers as a service. So that is another model that is also getting popular. This is called CAS. So the idea here is, when you have this is in the case of microservice application, mostly applicated to microservice application, but that is not a requirement. Many of the normal applications are also following a kind of a containerized approach. The advantage is that the dependencies can be easily wrapped into a container and deploy, but containers are more applicable for microservices. So in the case of microservices architecture, what you can follow here is like you can split into different services, like services 1, services 2, and imagine services 3 and whatever, up to this container as a service, and each one can be deployed into separate containers. Okay, each one can be deployed into separate containers. And so for Azure there are different services for that particular purpose. So I can explain that a bit, like 1 second. Okay, so these are kind of a individual containers, and we need some way by which we manage all those things, but these are for kind of a normal kind of application, this would be fine. But in case of some extreme complex applications or kind of a mission critical application, so there comes the concept of managed containers, like the Azure Kubernetes service or EKS, managed containers. So these are related terms, so let's put a tab here so that we can understand. These are belonging just for microservices mostly. It can be also, in some cases it can be also applicable for other type of applications as well, different other models as well, but just for the sake of understanding I put like this, microservices. Okay, managed containers. So managed containers means if you deploy your application separately into service 1 separate, service 2, service 3 into separate containers, that is fine. But in case of some critical application, you need some orchestrator to manage all these things. So that concept is called the Kubernetes. So it is an orchestrator that is developed by Google, Kubernetes service. So this is a kind of a managed service that is provided by Kubernetes service is an open source framework that is provided by Google, and many cloud vendors have integrated this Kubernetes services into their own versions, that is whether the cloud or the Google, whether the Azure or the Amazon or Google has also their own versions. So the advantage here is that in the case of Kubernetes service like EKS, Elastic Kubernetes service, in the case of Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service, or in the case of Azure, it can be Azure AKS. You can think of as Azure AKS service, Azure Kubernetes service. Thing is, you just inform what you want. It's kind of a declarative model, and you mention how much ports you want, how much capability your resources, your containers need, as well as what type of image, like is it a Windows image container or Linux image container, what type of container. So this it's not just what of Linux or Windows alone, it will be having that application plus its dependencies as well. So this can be think of as an image file and the way by which we deploy this kind of applications in is like, once we have the microservices, then we build it into a image file, then store that in a service registry, then we use that particular image file. So how we use that particular image file is by through deployment with the respective configuration. So the configuration includes all these things like how much ports we want, how much capability we want, how much container we need, and all those things. And then we deploy that to AKS or EKS. So this is interesting, and I have already taken a session, so you can check out the channel, and Azure Kubernetes service is there, so you can watch that session for getting a more information on these kinds of deployment. So the benefits that provide, I can explain within a quick way. Like the benefits that provide by this kind of deployment models are like you can individually scale up the containers, then you can keep your applications into separate services, but still you can consider that as an integrated application with a different minute services. So a lot of microservice advantages also you would get from such kind of approach. So that is what this kind of deployment service is what helping. So both these are called highly available containers. So this managed containers are called the highly available containers. Okay. Then when I explained about this containers, there comes the concept of this load balancer as well. So the concept of containers is a container can be spin up at any time, and it can be deleted at any time after its usage. So for the public to interface, especially if you're having your web application and API that are stored inside containers, let's explain that as well, so you get a familiarity. So let's say your web API is in a container and your application is in another container, in the case of a simple use case. Okay, then your public so this is a web application to, let's say, specifically React application or React or Angular application. Okay, application. So the public endpoint, so the users from the public endpoint, users will need to access to this particular application. So as it is running inside a container, so it might be scale. For example, sometimes when the load increase, it may be running in 2 or 3 or whatever ports, or 5 ports, or whatever, or it may be 100 or whatever ports, and each will be a different instances. So how your users will be able to access these things? So there is a need for a load balancer in place. So this load balancer will work on front of this particular containers. So this is the beauty of using services, managed services like EKS or the Azure Kubernetes service, because if you create such a service, the load balancer will be automatically created so that it provide an IP, so your users can directly use. So users in the sense, it can be another microservice application, it can be, and if you provide the authenticated way by which it is connecting to here, probably using managed identity or something in the case of Azure, then your different applications can use. Similarly, if you want to expose a particular IP to a public interface, you can do that as well, so that your users can do. So these are the different ways by which you can you can structure your application in cloud. Now we have to let's understand about the database a bit more. So database options in cloud. So there are different databases that are supported in cloud. Let's see into the Azure database. Okay, so in Azure different databases are supported. So these are common for when I explain about Azure, you can think of it as common with the Amazon, as well as you can relate that with other cloud providers as well. Then the MySQL, if you are prefer to use MySQL for your application, you can use that as well. So the step for creating it is similar. That is not much complex. It's very easy. Just click create, fill up all the required things. So according to the service, different type of service that are provided by cloud, different kinds of options are what they will be showing you. So you have to fill all those things and then continue. Then you can that will take some time, possibly within a few seconds or minutes might be, and then your resource you can straight away use. And once you use that particular resource, you will be deleting that as well. So we need different devices for our purpose, different resources for our purpose, for our application. So the ideal way is you should, I'm explaining in the case of Azure, is you should create a resource group first. Then you can under the resource group, that is when you create a resource in Azure, always make it a point to create a specific resource group. So this resource group can act like as an kind of a container, so that in case if you want to manage all the different resources underneath that. For example, if you, in the case of a environment or something, you can create a resource group, and if you create all the environments, specifically VMs under that particular resource group, the advantage is that at some point of time you can automate that. So using the resource group, if you filter by resource group and the particular type of service, some kind of script like the PowerShell or Bash script can identify all the resources, and you can execute an action against a particular resources. Maybe you can straight away delete all the different resources at that point of time. So that is the beauty of the ARM template. So this it allows to parallelly execute these kind of activities. So always make it a point to include under the resource group. Similarly, in the case of Amazon, you have to tag your resources. Tag is another good thing which you can apply on. So based on the tags, you can filter the resources, and you can manipulate all the different things. And resource group as well, that is provided in the case of Amazon. Then so we have talked about the relational database and all such stuffs. So in addition to that, as it is running inside a cloud provider, some of the services like the MySQL has a security advisor in place, and it shows some of the anomalies if we ignore something. So cloud has a AI integrated in place. So many of these services have native integration with that particular AI advisor. So occasionally these cloud providers will show warnings like, okay, if you create this way, it will work better. Or when there is some change happens in their particular service, they will notify that as well. So you should always consider all those things while developing the application, because that will provide a better development experience. Then let's check about the different non-SQL or NoSQL types of databases in this Amazon as well as in Azure. So in the Azure terminology, it is called the Cosmos DB. So if you search about Cosmos DB, that is the NoSQL Azure Cosmos DB. So this is the multi-model NoSQL database that is provided by Azure. So because of that subscription issue, I won't be able to show that right now, as it is going through a live session. The concept is like inside this Cosmos DB, it's kind of a multi-model. You can select different types of types of different types of ways by which you can interact. So I can show you that on way. So earlier you might be understand about the RDS in Azure, RDS in Amazon RDS, relational database. So that was also a kind of a multi-model where you have the option to choose SQL, MySQL, or MS SQL, or Oracle, or whatever. So similar way in Cosmos DB you have the option to choose Core SQL, or Graph, or Cassandra, or table storage. So this is a better table storage than the native Azure table storage. So inside the Azure storage there is a table storage. I hope you're already aware, but this provides more features because the Cosmos DB, it's kind of a it's kind of a DB, NoSQL DB that is specially tailored by Azure for this particular performance as well as for reliability. So these have much replication options available, as well as it is also much performant. So if you want a table storage to use in production which needs quick access, then it is recommended to use the Cosmos DB, but it's a you have to check about the cost as well, how it differs from the normal table storage. So if that is fine for your application, then this is the one which is recommended. And here we can go into the Amazon world, where how this NoSQL is handled there. So here we have seen that in Azure, the Azure Cosmos DB is kind of a multi-model and supports this kind of thing. And we earlier understood that Amazon has a multi-model relational database which support these things. But in case of Azure, in the case of relational database, they are providing different services, each one of them, not like of a multi-model inside a wrapper like RDS or something. But in the case of NoSQL, that is extremely exact opposite of that relational, because here Azure provides this Cosmos DB, which you can think of as a wrapper underneath this multi-model, all these different other types of things. So it's kind of a similar to kind of a dynamic DB. So here when we explain about the RDS, we talked about what's the equivalent service of that in Azure or something. So we understood that MySQL has an equivalent service of that. Similar way, as this Azure Cosmos DB is a wrapper and has different services supported here, you might be thinking what's the equivalent of that in this Amazon. So this Core SQL, this is kind of a wrapper on top of the normal NoSQL. So you can use the SQL to interact with that particular NoSQL, but this is just a wrapper. It's a kind of a NoSQL, and on top of it you can think of this as a wrapper. So this table, you can think of this table storage as kind of Azure table storage. Not that one, sorry. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see this graph API. This is equivalent to AWS Neptune. Yeah, there's an equivalent service is there. Okay, so this is related to NoSQL. Let's understand a bit about the big data scenario as well. So because some of the application might be big data based applications, and let's see what are the different services that are available in respect to Azure as well as Amazon Web Services. So one option is like the SQL data warehouse. So this allows database for warehouse scenarios that is provided by Azure. So if you search here, its name is a bit changed. So when I used this Azure Data Warehouse 2 years ago, so when I used this service, it was earlier called the Azure Data Warehouse. So now the service has been changed to Azure Synapse Analytics, which is a kind of a data warehouse. Let's check whether we are talking about the same thing here. Yeah, Azure Synapse Analytics. Yeah, this is the one. So they have changed this one. Yeah, data warehousing, big data analytics. So this is not for a simple SQL DB cases, and this is particularly for the big data cases. So big data has certain kinds of characteristics, that it has a huge velocity of data, and it's going on an influx. So these are some of the characteristics I can show you. Characteristics. Big data. So this is the some of the characteristics of big data. You can search for more details. So there will be a huge amount of data that is collected and generated, and there will be variety of data. That is not a particular type of data, and velocity also will be high, and the value provided by these kind of big data is huge. So these are some of the characteristics, and if you are dealing with an application that deals with this kind of big data, then you can choose some of the services, and one of the services is called the Synapse Analytics. So Azure Data Warehouse, its earlier name, let's put Azure Synapse Analytics. So it supports both the relational and non-relational databases, relational and non-relational databases. Then the then the HD Insight, which is another one, HD Insight in Azure, which is a managed Hadoop cluster. Managed Hadoop cluster. So this Hadoop is used for big data scenarios, and this is HD Insight is a managed Hadoop cluster. Then the data factory is another one thing where you can check about that, this data factory. So here, HD Insight. So all of things, these things you can create. So sorry, this is the course. Yeah. So this is a data integration service provided by Azure. So it's a hybrid data integration simplified. This is a fully managed data integration service. Reconnectors at AWS. So different points can be connected and integrated and provides an output. So that is what the Azure Data Factory, and this is used for big data scenarios. Then another one is called the Azure Data Lake. So these are also used for, this service is also used for big data. So if you understand about some of the characteristics of these kind of services, you can straight away understand that these services store a lot of data, and it's capable of processing these much amounts of data, this much capacity data within a limited time. So that's one of the characteristics of Azure Data Lake. So let's see what's the equivalent of that in Amazon world. So here, this AWS Redshift is on thing. So you can Amazon Redshift. So this is equivalent to that Synapse Analytics, where it provides a fast, simple and cost-effective data. So I like the interface. See, when we search that, it straight away goes to here. Let's see how it is there in Azure Synapse Analytics. Let's see, yeah, it's okay, it is fine. So this subscription issue is there, so we weren't able to show that now here. So let's see here, like Synapse Analytics. We were discussing about this Amazon Redshift. Okay, So this is kind of a data warehouse where fast, cost-effective data warehouse can be extracted and queries to your data lake. So very interesting one. And all the different benefits that are provided by the Amazon, this particular Redshift, and all the things cost-effective, and every information is provided here. So you can look into that, and if you are interested, you can click on the create cluster, and you have to provide the different option. See, it is asking, so right now I am using a free tier. So it is asking, okay, what are you planning to use this cluster for? Is for a production or for a free trial? So this is particularly for learning about Amazon Redshift. This configuration is free for a limited time if your organization has never created a cluster. So this can be used. Okay. So it will show all the details, how much you will be charged and everything. So you have to be particularly careful about all these things while developing an application in Amazon, because the thing is there is not a kind of a subscription concept there in Amazon, and everything is tied to this account, and your account is created with a credit card. So if you not properly aware of these things and what all costs are, there is a possibility for incurred, then that will be straight away charged from here. So you have to be very careful when using these kind of things in Amazon. Then the okay, so we have just discussed about Redshift. The aim of this session is to give you an awareness about all these concepts, so that you can search by your own and learn, or possibly in the future we will be conducting a session on the Amazon Redshift. Hopefully, then if you want to learn more about that, you can always go for this documentation, and there is a training also provided by Amazon. It's called Amazon training, which can be used, and which can be, I think it's free, and you can use that for learning about more about Amazon services. Then next one is, we discussed in Azure a service called Azure HD Insight. So let's see what's the equivalent of that in this Amazon. So the equivalent of that in Amazon is called this Elastic Map Reduce. Let's see. I think some names have been changed, I think. Let's see. Okay, it is there. Amazon EMR, yeah. Let's search. It should come here. Amazon, yeah, it is there. EMR. We have to search by list, short form. Elastic Map Reduce, that is EMR. So if you search by that, you will get managed Hadoop framework. So this is equivalent to this Azure HD Insight, as well as the Spark, as well as there is a data pipeline in AWS, and that is the orchestration you can provide for data-driven workflow. So in the case of big data scenarios, you will be collecting the data from different areas, and you will be assembling all those things, and you will be connecting that to you will be transforming that and saving that in warehouse in a different form for analytical purpose. So see, data pipeline is not supported in Asia Pacific or Mumbai region. Please select another region. So it is just easy. You can click here and you can change that to a different region. So the interface is very easy when I check. So then we already discussed a bit about the virtual machines, the EC2. So this is equivalent to this particular Azure virtual machine. So I am not going into much detail into that. Then creating an instance is also instance in this EC2 is also very easy. You have to launch, click on the launch the instance. Only thing we need to be careful is like you have to select the free tier and you have to select that one, and then you will be able to continue. Then okay, let's say one more thing. So we are running out of time, so I will explain some more scenarios and we can wind up the session, and we will be I will be taking more sessions in the future, probably next week with another subject. Can be think of a Google Cloud as well. We can start with an overview and then we can go deep into all these different things. So the another one is like the how can we host the website in this cloud provider. So if you have a website with you, like so these are the different services we just recently visited. So if you have a website with you, like what to say, React application, React website or Angular application, how you are going to actually deploy that application to Amazon. Let's see first Amazon, and then we can check on how it is in Azure. So in Amazon, the service for that purpose is called Elastic Beanstalk. So if you type Elastic, it will show the second option, Elastic Beanstalk. This is used for run and manage web apps. So let's view the few features of that particular service. So this is an end-to-end application management, so you can host all the different things. So the one thing which we notice, so there is a related service as well. That's a light version of this one. That is Elastic Beanstalk is called a light sale. So that is also another service for hosting the application, virtual private server for a low predictable month, light sale. Yeah. So this is suitable for simple web application, websites, business software, and dev test environment. So this will be worth checking. I haven't checked this one, so we'll be checking that as well. So this Elastic Beanstalk is another option. So the equivalent of that in Azure is called so here Elastic Beanstalk has different options, like you can create the different environments for dev, test, or QA, and you can manage the applications as well. So this environment concept is interesting to understand, because each environment has its own specific set of configurations and everything, so that you can customize for your different environments. So the related thing in Azure is called the app services, Azure app services. So this is the one which is used for traditionally used in cloud, traditionally in the sense earlier we used in Azure for managing hosting web application as well as API. So if you look into that, you can see a few of the details here. Okay, this is Azure app services. So it can use to host both the web application as well as this API, but there is a separate API management in Azure called the Azure API management as well. So you can check if you are interested in API development to learn more about this API management, what it's all about. It's a hybrid multi-cloud management platform for API across all environments. So that is also another one. Let's see in Amazon any API enabled services there. API service. Yeah, there is an API gateway there. So it is used for build, deploy, and manage API. So we are going a bit fast. Let's see on the serverless side. So earlier when we discussed about the different concepts, like the different models of development, we understood about the function as a service, that is the Azure Functions and AWS Lambda. So this is the concept of serverless. So if you are developing your application in a microservices patterns, then you can worth checking these two services, like the AWS Lambda. yeah, lambda. So they are saying like run code without thinking about, so on, okay, function. So here you can create the function, you have the separate function. So here there is one difference with regard to the Azure function. So let's explain that as well. So this is the Azure functions. Let's see what's the difference is this AWS lambda. Okay, so if you are having an application, let's say a simple application where you have a lot of IoT devices and you want to host a microservice, that is an API, to respond to these IoT service. So basically you will be creating an IoT API for that purpose, which will be based on an HTTPS trigger. So each time your IoT device calls this particular Azure function, it will be triggered automatically and you will write the associated logic. So this is interesting aspect of this Azure function. Like you can focus just on the logic and you don't have to bother about how that Azure function is spinning up and everything. So it will automatically host all the different things. So there are two pricing models, like the consumption model as well as the dedicated plans out there. So this consumption model is like you are paying for what you are going to use. So if you trigger this 5 times, you will be paying for 5 times. But dedicated plans makes more sense if your application, if this particular trigger is going to execute continuously. It is not better to go with a consumption based model, because that will make things worse. Then the AWS lambda, it has a similar service as well. So the difference, so all the things are same. The way by which the interface looks a bit different. So in lambda you will be creating the function, then you will be adding input and output trigger, whereas in the Azure function, when you create the function, you will be specifying which trigger you want. It can be an HTTP trigger or it can be a blob based trigger. So when something falls into your blob and you want to pick that automatically, that can be faced. So similar other connectors, these are called the connectors. So connectors are two types, like the input connectors and output connectors, and that can be there. So when you create a Azure function, it will be like this inside a function wrapper, and underneath that you can create function on function 2, function 3. So imagine you need to do a lot of things for your IoT purpose or IoT dev purpose. You can create a wrapper function like this, IoT functions, and underneath that you can create different functions, and each will be doing a different things. But in the case of AWS lambda, there is not such a category there. So you have to just create the different functions. So it will end up like, so if you want to, so you can think of like this. This is just an example. It don't need to be in this way. You can say different ways. So but you can always use tags and other things to separate the different things. So this is the concept of serverless. And while developing this Azure function, always make it a point that you should consider this Azure function for short running task, probably within 1 or 2 minutes. If you want long running task, then there are different options, but need to pay for that. So, and this dedicated plan is also this costly. You can tie that to this app service as well, app service plan. Then the final part which we are going to discuss is about the monitoring. So we developed the application, we deployed that, and we are going to use that. We purposefully not considered two important topics here, like the network, as well as I not able to show some of the features that are related to Azure because of that subscription issue. And as I going through a live session, I was not able to rectify all those things, but I hope you got an idea about the comparison of these two things. So once we made an application, the next step we want to understand is about how we are monitoring that application. So for monitoring purpose, there are different services out there, like Monitor, Azure Monitor. Let's say, yeah, this one, monitor application. I think this one, yeah. So this can read the logs from your resources. There are different resources that you are creating. Not just from that resources, it can be from anywhere from the Azure as well as from non-Azure resource as well, or even from other clouds like Amazon or Google. So that way you can extend this Azure monitor, and you can extend that to analytics as well, which can be used for log analytics as well. And this another thing, interesting thing here is Azure Sentinel. Once I can show you Sentinel. Yeah, this one. This can be integrated into this cloud monitoring. Let's see. Let's open that in a different way. So this is worth checking. So this is kind of an AI-based analyzer where it analyzes the different logs and can take decisions based on that. So see, this is connecting cloud data, cloud scale across all devices and multiple clouds, and detect anomaly, uncovered threats, and all those things. So it's worth checking this Azure Sentinel. So it will actually, what this Azure Monitor do is, Azure Monitor will actually collect the data not just from the Azure resources but also from different areas. Then in addition to that, it can also provide valuable insights like how your application is behaving for the past few days and such things. So if you are going to build up a dashboard for that purpose, it will take quite a lot of time for all those things. So it will be better to include this kind of things, but the cost factor will be there. So all the different cost can be evaluated from the Azure cost monitoring. So cloud cost management, and then the Azure cost calculator is another good resource. So if you want to, if you're not sure about the pricing and other things, so you can always go here and check that. This is Azure pricing calculator. Similarly for Amazon, there will be Amazon cost calculator. Yeah, Amazon pricing calculator. That is the different pricing calculator. Let's say the equivalent of this Azure Insights or Azure Monitor. Earlier it was called Azure Insights. So the Azure Monitor in how it looks like in AWS, and we can wrap up the session. AWS Cloud. Let's type Cloud Watcher. That will say Cloud Patch, not Patcher. Yeah, this Cloud Patch. Yeah. Okay, so here similar to Azure Monitor, you can, there it was called alerts. So here you can create the alarms and sufficient rules and all the different things, events, rules and such things. So you can create the rules. So from which rule, what should it, how should it trigger? In addition to that, it also provides different kinds of insights. Then another thing is kind of a log groups where you can aggregate your logs from particular area, and you can manage that and process that accordingly. So that's all about the different insights services that are provided by the insights, or we can call that as a log analysis that are provided by Azure as well as Amazon. In the case of Azure, it's called Azure Monitor, and here in Amazon it is called the Cloud Patch. So we have managed to cover a few of the things. I hope this will get you an overview about the different cloud service. So in the next week we will be covering about the Google Cloud, which is also an interesting option, and we lightly touch about all these different vendors like the Amazon and the Azure, and gone through each of these things. You can always go for the documentation and learn more about that, but there are additional things to be learned from that. So if you want to learn from the Microsoft perspective, that Microsoft Learn will be a good option. Similarly, there is a training provided by the Amazon as well. So the apologies for that subscription locking in that Azure vendor, Azure subscription. So I will be checking that and will be rectifying that. Might be some issues. So thanks all for watching this session. Have a nice evening. We will be coming up with more in the next session. So this session went quite a bit further, but I want to cover all the different scenarios. So that's why I gone a bit further. So thanks all for watching. Have a nice day.